The disturbing trends continue, my friends. This time it is well known by now, the controversy over the Google Manifesto. It seems the new YouTube attitude towards controversy has infected the parent company, or maybe the other way around. But that does not matter since the subject of wrongthink has now become an adequate reason to fire employees. Are we witnessing the rise of the Google Inquisition? Google's other ugly secret: some managers keep blacklists. Is publishing an attack on political correctness a fireable offense? Is blacklisting coworkers who disagree with you? These are the tough questions facing Google. On Friday night, Vice's motherboard reported that a controversial internal memo written by a concerned Google employee was going viral within the company. The memo, titled PC Considered Harmful and since dubbed the Google Manifesto on social media, argued 2 points. First, that Google has become an ideological echo chamber where anyone with centrist or right-of-center views fears to speak their mind. Second, that part of the tech industry's gender gap can be attributed to biological differences between men and women. This news caused an immediate and lasting uproar, both within Google and on public discussion forums like Twitter. The dismay and outrage, and then the inevitable counter-outrage in response to the initial outrage, heated up further when Gizmodo released the full text of the open letter. Critics have primarily focused on author James Damore's implication that women are less prevalent in software engineering and leadership roles due to the unequal distribution of innate characteristics like spatial reasoning and neuroticism. Update: Damore has since been fired. On CNBC, Google is teaching girls that their path to financial freedom lies in complaining to HR. The managing director of a Peterson investment fund said on Tuesday, drawing sharp criticism on social media. The comments made by Eric Weinstein, the managing director of Thiel Capital, come after Google fired engineer James Damore for circulating a memo that argued biological differences were the reason for the shortage of women at the company. Many employees in Google were outraged by the memo. One employee, Lana Dogan, took to Twitter saying that she would leave the company if HR does nothing. The tweet was later deleted. But these tweets are not happening just within Google. This authoritarian leftist suggests violence as a remedy. I started reading that Googler email, and honestly, at this point, if I worked there, I would just walk to his desk and beat the shit out of him. Violence as a remedy is becoming a recurring theme with the regressives. Threatening violence is one thing, but it is harmless if it is confined to a safe little room the person is tweeting from. But the vigilantism does not end there. They want to round up all heretics and remove them. This tweet, reacting to the firing of the author of the manifesto, suggests we do just that. Good job. Now what about all the employees who said they agreed with the sexist stereotypes? In a recent video interview, Jordan Peterson talks with James Damore, link in the description. Damore talks of secret unrecorded meetings at Google about diversity, where it is made clear that in order to gain more diversity, they would need to discriminate based on race or gender, which I need not remind you is racist and sexist. Damore says he was told by upper management at Google that discussing biological difference in the sexes was a viewpoint that was unacceptable and not allowed at Google. A Google spokesperson pointed towards a statement released by CEO Sundar Pichai on Tuesday explaining the decision to fire the engineer and trying to reassure staff that they can freely express their views. First, let me say that we strongly support the right of Googlers to express themselves, and much of what was in the memo is fair to debate. Regardless of whether a vast majority of Googlers disagree with it, the contentious internal discussion revived a concern dating back to 2015. An unknown number of Google managers maintained blacklists of fellow employees, evidently refusing to work with those people. The blacklists are based on personal experiences of others' behavior, including views expressed on politics, social justice issues, and Google's diversity efforts. Damore's manifesto wasn't classic political speech, said Harmeet Kaur Dhillon, an experienced business and labor lawyer. Rather, it's what she called controversial speech, not unlike any other opinion that might anger coworkers. She added, these are not insane views that he's extolling here. They're just out of the mainstream. He's entitled to hold views that are inconsistent with the mainstream. This trend towards ferreting out and eliminating controversial speech is the thin edge of the wedge. I am am not a conservative and likely have more in common with the people on the left at Google, but draw the line at having thought police. Not surprising, Gizmodo refers to the memo as an anti-diversity screed. I read much of the memo and it is well reasoned and rational. It does not matter if I agree with all or part or even none of the content, since it is this person's honest representation of the corporate environment as he sees it at Google. James Damore offers a thoughtful reply to public response. I value diversity and inclusion. Am not denying that sexism exists and don't endorse using stereotypes. When addressing the gap in representation in the population, we need to look at population level differences in distributions. If we can't have an honest discussion about this, then we can never truly solve the problem. Psychological safety is built on mutual respect and acceptance, but unfortunately, our culture of shaming and misrepresentation is disrespectful and unaccepting of anyone outside its echo chamber. Despite what the public response seems to have been, I've gotten many personal messages from fellow Googlers expressing their gratitude for bringing up these very important issues, which they agree with, but would never have the courage to say or defend because of our shaming culture and the possibility of being fired. This needs to change. I'm not going to read the entire memo here. Please check the links in the description, but I will read the bullet points that stand out. Google's political bias has equated the freedom from offense with psychological safety, but shaming into silence is the antithesis of psychological safety. The silencing has created an ideological echo chamber where some ideas are too sacred to be honestly discussed. The lack of discussion fosters the most extreme and authoritarian elements of this ideology. Extreme: all disparities in representation are due to oppression. Authoritarian: we should discriminate to correct for this oppression. Differences in distributions of traits between men and women may in part explain why we don't have 50% representation of women in tech leadership. Discrimination to reach equal representation is unfair, divisive, and bad for business. The memo titled Google's Ideological Echo Chamber, right or wrong, is well thought out and contrary to the expected negative attention it received from much of the left, and it even offers thoughtful suggestions to end gender inequalities. From Fortune, Google's ideological echo chamber. It was a busy weekend for the diversity and inclusion crowd. It started as an anti-diversity memo published on Google's internal mailing list on Friday. Then it tumbled, first in bits and pieces, then in its entirety, into public view. Google's ideological echo chamber is a 10-page manifesto published by an anonymous Google software engineer, now known to be James Damore, that argues several points, chief among them that the search giant's left-leaning biases are shutting down conversations about its flawed diversity agenda. When it comes to diversity and inclusion, Google's left bias has created a politically correct monoculture that maintains its hold by shaming dissenters into silence. After a bit of throat clearing, he makes his case. At Google, we're regularly told that implicit, unconscious, and explicit biases are holding women back in tech and leadership, he says. I'm simply stating that the distribution of preferences and abilities of men and women differ in parts due to biological causes, and further, and that these differences may explain why we don't see equal representation of women in tech and leadership. Aero Magazine's Malhar Mali offers a long defense of the Google Manifesto. James Damore was fired yesterday for perpetrating gender stereotypes. From the various reactions I read, you would think Damore wrote the next iteration of Mein Kampf. Gizmodo labeled it an anti-diversity screed. Mashable called it a racist, sexist manifesto when reporting that the author's identity had been revealed. Tweet storms were fashionable, with one user even positing that Damore was saying, "Your gender means that you're biologically incapable of doing this job and should never have been hired." A popular response by Jonathan Zunger chided the author as causing significant harm to people across the country and for being incorrect in everything except Damore's points on the male gender role being inflexible. Even the respectable Atlantic managed to pipe up with Googlers' would-be manifesto reveals tech rotten core. Another Mashable piece complained the text of that Google employee's manifesto is just like every other MRA rant, with the writer of the piece strangely going on to say the biological arguments get into some weird assumptions around gender that are also offensive for reasons unrelated to the tech industry. Rather than debating the issues raised in the manifesto, I want to focus on the reality of censorship of conscience. The authoritarian left views any contradicting opinions as as hate speech. They now have pushed this bizarre notion to suggest that words are in and of themselves violence, which is, I don't need to remind you, some pretty shaky territory to be venturing into. It is manifest that if words are violence, then violence is necessary to counter opposing points of view. You can't help but notice the irony in the very same people running around labeling everyone they disagree with as fascists, now calling for violence to contain opinions. They openly call for speech to be restricted to what they deem as safe or, and here is the best part, only proven truths. These truths are of course only the opinions they agree with for now, but as we know, it is now a fluid world and notions can change from minute to minute, almost as easy as switching genders. In this frightening and confusing new world where reality is what I say it is, and you are a racist or a sexist for disagreeing with it, you can lose your ability to earn an income and thrive. The calls on the left for violence against ideas harkens back to the dark and ugly days. If you have some familiarity with the witch trials of centuries ago, you know this condemnation of wrongthink spreads like a virus that cannot be contained. This is the reason I showed the tweet. Good job. Now what about all the employees who said they agreed with the sexist stereotypes? Burn more witches, I say. Here I make an appeal to my friends on the left. Do not travel down this path. It is not righteous. There is no great crime in hearing what someone has to say. Refusing to listen to dissenting points of view has become normalized to the point that any opinion, no matter how insignificantly differing from your own, is not valid and should not be considered. Stop labeling everyone that is not in complete agreement with you as alt-right, sexist, or homophobic, or all the other phobias. And do, please, stop the knee-jerk response to anyone critical of Islam. Yes, 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 it's the religion of peace and the most feminist religion there is. But take a peek at how people live under the harsh and inhuman conditions of Sharia. To my friends on the right, stop crying libtard and being automatically critical of anything or anyone who is liberal. It is through the liberal ideas of the Enlightenment that has brought the freedom we now enjoy. Well, that is, those lucky enough not to live under Sharia law. Look, I voted for Bernie Sanders, not Donald Trump. My friends on the political left should be cognizant of the facts in the United States. Republicans control the White House, both houses of Congress, and the Supreme Court. If you truly, in your heart of hearts, believe that behaving this way, this extreme name-calling and labeling, is going to win back the country like it didn't do in 2016, then by all means, do your conscience. But sane people see that making enemies of almost everyone is no great formula for success. Thank you for tuning in to Radio to be Censored. Goodbye.